Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the latest news, the breaking news in the Vallow Daybell case, and that is regarding her attorney Mark Means. Today is December 29th, 2021, and yesterday, Crime Talk with Scott Reich. Big ups for him. If you do not follow him on YouTube and his other socials, I highly recommend it. He broke the news that Mark Means was disqualified from representing Lori Vallow Daybell. And I don't think a lot of us did not see this coming. We saw this coming. All the I told you so's in the house. He says he has trouble saying I told you so. I don't. I told you so. See, way back in the case, whenever Lori and Chad lammed it to Hawaii and then she was hailed back into the mainland to answer for her missing children, allegedly Mark Means was hired to represent Lori and Chad. Okay, and he represented Chad on the record, saying, I'm the attorney for Chad Daybell, which just, boggles the mind that later, whenever we're in a Zoom call because of COVID, he says on the record that he never represented anybody but Lori. So it was like that was the first time that you go, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to forget that you were on the record representing Chad Daybell. And I remember when he did that, a lot of us were following this case, and we remember when we did that, and we not only did our own memories go, wait a minute, I remember looking at the Zoom call and seeing Rob Wood's head kind of turn a little bit like a dog when it's heard something the wrong way. Yeah. Let's roll the tape.
Mr. Means, the court is inclined to ask one question here today. Number one, because the charge that's been listed here in the information does pertain to conspiracy. Mr. Means, have you ever represented any of the alleged co-conspirators that are set forth in the criminal complaint?
No, Your Honor, other than Mrs. Daybell.
Okay. All right. With that,
Your Honor, I need to interject. At a bail reduction here in Madison County, Mr. Means did represent to the court that he was also representing Mr. Vallow. Or Mr. Daybell. He didn't represent, there was no criminal matter against him at that time, but I do think that's appropriate to know.
all right. It sounds like there's a disagreement there. What I'm going to ask the parties to do, ultimately, there's a question of whether or not a conflict exists, and I'm going to ask each of the parties to submit what their request is regarding that issue so that the court can make a decision as soon as is possible and as soon as is necessary based upon that issue.
They wanted to preserve a record that this is the defendant. She's, got him. She wants him as her attorney. It was allowed to go on, even though the state at multiple times has raised this objection that there is a conflict of interest here. He represented Chad and Lori. He represented Chad on the record. He represents Lori now. That's a conflict because now the charges come forth and they could be and possibly are going to be opposing each other. They're going to have a conflicting interest. You cannot serve two gods, okay? So in order to fix any alleged conflict, what people do is they sign waivers. Both parties sign a waiver saying, hey, yeah, I know this happened in the past, like he represented me in a drunken driving incident or something like that. Even that something's more innocuous than what happened here because this was representation essentially leading up to the murder charges, the missing children charges. Okay, so he represented one or both at different times during that point. Okay, now when you move that into a more serious issue as a death penalty case with a conspiracy charge, whoa, an appearance of a conflict is a conflict and someone has to make a decision. And even though I believe, in my opinion, Mark Means zealously represented Lori Vallow at this point, like he has picked his team, he's representing Lori Vallow, blah, 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 blah. Even though he means well, it does not matter for the matter of a conflict, because the waiver has to be able to say, yeah, I know he represented Chad. Chad knows he represented me. Both parties agree, blah, 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 blah. The thing is confidential information against the other party. And if the other party ever have to go against each other, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. You end up representing Lori over Chad. That's not fair. And it looks like, in my opinion, Judge Boyce created the record. They allowed it to go on to a certain point, with allowing Mark Means representation under the concept that that's what Lori wanted. And you got to keep in mind, how did Lori get this attorney? In my opinion, Chad Daybell got her Mark Means and likely paid the retainer. Remember those phone conversations from the jail? Just call Mark Means. Mark Means going to call. That kind of thing, when he was allegedly sitting in his car and the feds were digging the children up in the yard and Lori called from the jail. You remember that? It wasn't like Lori went out, in my opinion, and scoured out her favorite attorney, Mark Means. This was someone that Chad had on board to help her out. So think about that. And then whenever times got tough and his tit got in a sling, he went and got himself a good criminal defense attorney and left her with Mark Means. I mean, that says a lot about both these people, in my opinion. But let's not get far afield. The Judge Boyce has decided that he's going to disqualify Mark Means from representing Lori Vallow in this case. And he basically said that there was a conflict of interest, that the judge didn't believe the representation to the court that Mark Means had made earlier, which we all saw right out of the gate, and said, hey, wait a minute. When he essentially, I call Allah, when he misrepresented himself, to the court in a Zoom meeting, saying he never represented Chad Daybell. I mean, that in my opinion was a fanciful mistruth. I mean, whatever you want to call it. Whatever you want to call it, right there out of the gate. If they could have pulled the tape, Your Honor, I think that would have done something. But still, they wanted to be fair. And on June 8th, 2021, the prosecution yet again wanted to protect the record, and they wanted to resolve this conflict issue, because I don't want to be critical of somebody's work that they've presented in court, but Means kept filing pleadings and sworn declarations, and you can look back if you care to in the things I've covered here. I've covered his pleadings in depth when they've gone off the rails, and that whole thing where she was in the state's custody trying to be made well, and she's calling out to the LDS for attorneys, and he's filing to the court all this stuff. Essentially, as I'm reading, you can see that I'm saying, Lord, it seems like he's swearing under penalty of perjury, making himself a witness. I say this multiple times, and I was thinking, I'm a paralegal, and I'm thinking, how did nobody catch that? Well, people have caught it. Yes, he seemingly was making himself a witness in this case, and you don't do that as an attorney. So in some, Judge Boyce harkened back to that earlier sworn statement where Mark Means was on the record, said he represented Chad Daybell, then cue the tape. He's on a Zoom call representing to the court again that he's only represented Lori. So essentially that was incorrect, and an unreliable narrator, so to speak. And then later on, they let it to continue until it became a death penalty issue. Once the kids were uncovered and it was found to be murder, the prosecution the state keeps asking for this disqualification, but the judge wants to be fair. He wants to protect the record. And so he sees and he makes note that, Mark Means has kept filing pleadings along, I think even after Archibald is first chair now, because he's death penalty qualified. And in these pleadings, it seems that Means is swearing under penalty of perjury, as you do on some of these motions, but it's almost making himself as a witness, which is a no-no. So he's bringing that up as a cause for concern. And then the third issue would be the issue of the waiver itself. Allegedly, when Lori would have made that initial waiver, which wouldn't necessarily even be applicable now, but when she made the waiver, she was of sound mind, seemingly. Now Lori is no longer of sound mind. She is trying to be made well in a facility. She's deemed incompetent, and she's seemingly reaching out to other people because she wants a new attorney. Well, what do you do there? Because she signed a waiver before when she was competent saying she wanted Mark Means, but now she's reaching out saying essentially she wants a different attorney. And what do you do? Because she's not well. So you got to cover your bases here. You got to make sure that the client is getting the representation they need. And the judge also, between the lines, kind of questions his ability to represent the client in this case at this point. And I just want to say, let's be fair. I think that Mark Means has tried to the best of his ability to zealously represent Lori Vallow. Okay? I would even go so far as to say I think he really cares about Lori Vallow. I mean, he has allegedly spent a lot of time visiting her when she was in the jail. I don't know if he visits her in the facility. I bet he does. So he's probably quite invested in this case and is trying to the best of his ability. Now, when you're an attorney, at least in my state, there's something called CLE, that's continuing legal education, and everybody is required to do it. You don't just go to law school for 4 years and then pass the bar and you're good. That's it. No, you have to do your CLE credits, all right? And it's pretty easy to do. It's not that hard. And everybody in my state is required a certain amount of ethics. I really think that Mark Means, and this is no shade, you really need to just get with your ethics classes. Like, don't just take that, 1 hour ethics class. Take your whole specialization in ethics. Learn a little bit more about what you do and you want and you don't do. And sometimes some things are very obvious, and sometimes the ethics violations aren't as obvious. Now, conflicts of interest are obvious, and you can find many, cases dealing with this. But you don't want to run into your state bar. You don't want to get violations. You don't want to be disbarred. You know what I mean? I'm not saying this will get him disbarred. I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that, just take some ethics classes, dude. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that the attorney now is Archibald for Lori Vallow. And since Mark Means is so close to Lori Vallow and was seeing her quite often, I don't know how much he now sees her in her current facility. And since they had allegedly such a lot of communication and so much rapport or whatever, I'm sure that Mark Means is not going to be too well pleased to be taken off the case, much less have his communications reduced with Lori Vallow. And I honestly think that's what Archibald needs to send a letter to Mark Means, thank you for your service type thing, and let him know that he probably shouldn't communicate with Lori Vallow anymore. And the reason I say this is because he is no longer her attorney, and now whatever they talk about between themselves is not under attorney-client privilege. Now, let's say it was somebody that was well-regarded and well-trusted, and they just still wanted to keep visiting their friend now in jail, their former client in jail, and they could be trusted to talk about the weather and nothing about the case at all. That would be one thing. But you know what, guys? you know what? I don't think Archibald's going to want to take that risk. So sadly, now if he's off the case and he's disqualified, the best thing to do may be for him to not talk to her anymore. So, you know, guys, I understand that a lot of folks don't like Mark Means. They don't care for him. It's time to hang up the jackalope antlers and play a good, long, strong taps do 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 for Mark Means in his representation of Lori Vallow. And, you know, I feel for the guy, and just in the sense of, you know, he's put a lot of effort into this client and in this relationship, and now it's been ripped from him. I don't know if he's going to file a motion to reconsider. That would be probably the proper motion to file in court. Gosh, you know, I hope not. I hope he just takes this graciously and just goes and takes some ethics classes. But, you know, again, no shade. I mean, I told you so, but no shade, you know. Anyway, I hope you found this enlightening. It's 6:25. I don't ever wake up this early, but this happened yesterday and I just wanted to get this out here. So